Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of flickering candles, scratchy wool tunics, and a very real fear that something invisible might be watching you from the treetops. You're walking the muddy paths of a small medieval village where every cough could mean a curse, and if your bread doesn't rise, someone's probably hexed your oven. It's dark, darker than you're used to, and the stars overhead feel a little too sharp, like they're watching you back. There's a chill that settles in your spine, even though you're wearing 3 layers and smell like smoked fish. This is the Middle Ages. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always lovely seeing how many of you are drifting off from every corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the village, wooden shoes squelching in muck. Every hut leans a little like it's too tired to stay upright. Smoke curls from chimney holes, and the scent is half wood smoke, half boiled cabbage. The year? Probably 1327. But no one's keeping great records out here. You pass a shuttered window with a crudely carved sun above it, meant to keep away evil eyes. Superstition isn't just background noise in this world. It is the air you breathe. You pause as you notice something odd. A string of garlic is hung, not just in the kitchen, but across the barn door. The cows are precious, and one of them gave sour milk yesterday. People are worried. It doesn't matter that the milk bucket was dirty, or that the cow's been eating damp hay. No, clearly something unnatural is at work. Fear hangs thick as the evening mist, and it's not just the big flashy fears like war or famine. No, the real terror is subtle, constant. You hear a crow caw and wonder, bad omen? You lose a chicken, and someone mutters that Agnes, the widow down the lane, looked at it funny last week. Medieval Europeans didn't have Netflix. They had stories. Stories about witches, demons, cursed bloodlines, and devils who walked in disguise. These tales weren't fun Halloween games. They were explanations. The world made no sense otherwise. Why did your son die? In the night after seeming healthy all day? Why did a healthy village fall to fever while the neighboring one thrived? When life is precarious and death is unpredictable, every mystery needs a villain. Enter the devil. Not the charming tempter of modern fiction, but a lurking presence behind misfortunes large and small. Historians still argue whether the average peasant actually feared the devil daily, or simply used him as a kind of cosmic explanation for everyday frustrations. But either way, his shadow was never far. You reach the village square. There's a wooden post, stained, weathered. It hasn't been used recently, but you know what it's for. Witch trials aren't common, yet. That's more of a 16th century vibe, but the seeds are already planted. You've heard stories of odd women being blamed for poor harvests, of travelers cursed after arguments. You don't know the science of disease or meteorology, but you do know that strange things happen, and someone is always responsible. The church bells ring. It's Vespers. You cross yourself and whisper a prayer, just in case. Better safe than sorry. As the candles flicker inside the chapel, you feel a little safer, but not completely. Even here, even in the house of God, demons are said to lurk in the corners, waiting for your attention to slip. Your friend Thomas swears his cousin saw a demon once, tall as a haystack, eyes like embers, hooves clacking over cobblestone. You want to believe it's nonsense, but you've seen things too. That night in the forest, that whisper near the stream. You shake your head. Best not to think too hard. Back in your home, you stuff rags into the cracks between the door and the frame. Cold wind, yes, but also, who knows what else? The fire pops, casting dancing shadows on the walls. You lie on a straw mattress that smells faintly of goat. Your family snores around you, one giant communal snuggle for warmth. Still, your eyes dart toward the window, just checking. Because in this world, fear isn't just for children, it's part of survival. A little paranoia might keep your soul intact. You mutter another prayer, just in case. One last thing before you drift off. Your neighbor swears she saw a figure out by the well last night. Not human, not quite. Tall, silent, watching. You clutch your rosary. The night is long. The morning mist is thick enough to taste, curling around your boots as you crunch across frost-hardened earth. You're heading toward the edge of the village, where the fields meet the forest, and everything feels a little too quiet. Not just sleepy, watchful. Because today, you're going to visit the old shrine, and that means walking right past the devil's footprints. No one carves signs or maps out here. You just know where they are. Near the split oak tree with a scar down its bark, where nothing ever grows quite right. There, in the shallow soil, are two impressions. They look like hooves, not animal hooves. Too wide, too symmetrical. Some say it's just erosion. Others whisper that Satan himself walked through this land one stormy night, looking for souls or snacks or both. You bend down to inspect the marks. They're always there, no matter how much it rains. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't erode, it seeps in. These so-called footprints are proof of something. Maybe not the devil exactly, but definitely of belief. And belief is a powerful thing. It's important to understand. The medieval devil wasn't just a bad guy with horns. He was the architect of all misfortune. If you broke a leg, the devil might have tripped you. If your child was born sickly, Satan was poking around in your business. If your flower turned black, you were cursed. Demons could ride the wind, twist your dreams, and sometimes even possess your goats. Yes, goat possession was genuinely feared. The poor animals were practically accused of moonlighting for hell. Now, historians still argue whether peasants truly thought demons were behind every misstep, or whether the imagery was more symbolic, a way to express dread and blame. But either way, you're not taking chances. You've got your tiny iron nail sewn into your tunic for protection. You saw your grandmother do it, so you do it too. Your walk takes you past a burned-out hut, long abandoned. The villagers say it once belonged to a man who talked too much about the devil. Not praising, just curious. He had books and dreams. That's the trouble. People who think too hard often meet fire in this timeline. You pick up the pace. Stories circulate like stale bread. In the next village over, they say a man made a deal with the devil for better crops. His turnips did great that year, and so did his pigs. But one night, people saw his shadow move separately from his body. And the next week, his barn burned down while he slept inside it. No one tried to save him. You don't mess with that kind of deal. You finally reach the shrine. It's barely more than a stone circle and a crude wooden cross, hunched like a weary monk. You place a small offering, bread, still warm, just in case. Not because you expect divine thanks, but because it's tradition, and traditions keep things stable, safe. On the way back, your thoughts drift. Why is Satan always described with goat legs and sulfur breath? Probably because goats were weird and sulfur smelled bad. But it runs deeper. The image of the devil as a horned, cloven-hoofed being took hold in Europe thanks to a mix of Christian doctrine and leftover pagan imagery. Old nature gods like Pan, once harmlessly mischievous, were retrofitted into agents of hell. After all, if you want to scare people straight, what better way than to turn their old comfort deities into nightmares? And it worked. People stopped dancing in the forests. They started praying in the cold. They stopped making jokes about fertility gods and started confessing sins about thoughts they barely understood. You scratch your head. Was that itch a bug or something worse? As you pass a muddy crossroad, a crow lands nearby and stares. Hard. You nod politely. Some birds are considered messengers. Others, omens. You don't know which this one is, so you play it safe. Back in the village, the blacksmith swears something strange happened last night. His bellows moved on their own. His tools were rearranged. You suggest wind or maybe a sleepwalking apprentice. He shakes his head. Number it was the devil, testing the forge, preparing for something. You offer a half-hearted laugh, but part of you wonders. After all, this world doesn't offer comfort in logic. It offers comfort in story. And those stories are sticky. You close the day by sitting near the hearth, watching sparks drift up the chimney like golden fireflies. You hum a low prayer, not sure if you believe it, but what's the harm? The air feels safer when words are spoken. You pull your woolen cloak tighter and glance at the door. Locked. Good. Outside, wind rustles the trees. Something screeches. Maybe an owl, maybe not. But just to be sure, you toss a handful of salt over your shoulder. Left shoulder. Always the left. You wake up with straw in your mouth and a stiff back, but hey, at least nothing demonic happened overnight. Probably. You stretch, crack your neck, and step outside into the morning fog, which, if we're honest, hasn't left for 3 days. Everything smells faintly of damp bread and sheep, and honestly, it's not the worst. Today's a housework day, which, in the Middle Ages, means reinforcing the constant defensive line between you and unseen evil. And yes, that includes witch bottles and bread wards. Let's dive into the charming weirdness that is domestic protection magic. You start by inspecting your windows. Technically, they're just holes with oiled parchment pulled tight, but they're yours. Above them hangs a little clump of rosemary and iron nails. Standard anti-witch gear. A lot of people hang bells too. You've got one above the door that jingles every time someone walks in. Spirits, they say, don't like bells. Or onions. Or Latin. You don't speak Latin, but you shout Ave Maria. Every now and then anyway, just to cover your bases. Inside, you've got a clay bottle tucked behind the hearth. It's full of nails, hair clippings, and, yes, awkwardly, your own urine. This is your witch bottle, and don't act like you're above it. Everyone has one. Some people even bury them under thresholds to trap any curses sneaking in. Is it weird? Yes. Does it work? Well, the cow hasn't died yet. Historians still argue whether these charms were truly magical in the eyes of the people or more like elaborate traditions, folk rituals passed down without much questioning. Either way, they served a purpose: control. In a world where nearly nothing is under your control, crafting a little bottle of nails and pee gives you the tiniest psychological edge. You remember your neighbor, old Marta, once used breadboards. She'd bake special loaves with herbs and cut across into the dough, then place them in corners of the house to absorb evil. Of course, the rats sometimes ate them, so that was counterproductive. But the idea was lovely. Every home has its quirks. One family keeps a live toad in a box under the bed. Another paints white chalk circles around their chickens. These little gestures aren't just superstition, they're comfort. You whisper a rhyme while sweeping. Sweep the badness out the door. Keep it from the earthen floor. It's nonsense, but it rhymes. That makes it work better, obviously. Oh, and don't forget the thresholds. Spirits apparently struggle with them. That's why you're not supposed to greet someone through a doorway. It confuses the magic. You step fully outside, say hello, then step back in. Every time. No exceptions. Mid-morning, you visit a friend. Her child's been crying nonstop. She's worried it's the evil eye. So she ties a red ribbon around the baby's wrist and recites a protective charm in a whisper. Does it help? Who knows? But the baby eventually quiets, and that's good enough. Some things are even weirder. There's a tale of a village that baked bread shaped like a bishop's hat to repel a demon who hated clergy. Another kept raw onions on every windowsill, then swapped them out weekly and buried the used ones. The stench was epic. But hey, no demon attacks reported. Scholars still debate how much of this was Christian, how much was leftover paganism, and how much was just practical paranoia. The lines are blurry. Christianity in the Middle Ages was often a patchwork quilt sewn over much older beliefs. The church didn't always love these home rituals, but as long as you attended Mass and didn't start floating or speaking in tongues, they usually let it slide. You find comfort in these rituals. They give your day rhythm. Sweep, pray, bury some hair in the garden, then lunch. Speaking of which, lunch today is pottage with some suspicious turnips, but no one's vomiting yet, so that's a win. As you eat, someone mentions a traveler who came through last week and spoke of a demon living in a mirror. Now, several villagers have covered theirs with linen. You never had a mirror, so that's not a problem. But still, you glance at your reflection in the soup. Just checking. The thing about demons is that they're sneaky. They're not always horns and fire. Sometimes they show up as odd moods, a sudden illness, a bad dream. Even your cow's limp could be a clue. There's no clear line between bad luck and you've been hexed. So you lean on these little rituals, these objects of defense. They don't cost much, and they might just save your soul. By evening, your cottage is swept, salted, warded, and blessed. You light a candle and say a charm to keep nightmares away. Sleep with your feet to the fire, they always say, so the devil can't find your head. Outside, the wind picks up again. You clutch your amulet, made from a rabbit's foot and a chipped coin. It's ugly, but it's your ugly. And sometimes, that's what matters. The bells ring at dawn. They always do. Not that you're particularly eager to be awake, but when the church bells call, you move. This morning, your breath fogs in the air as you walk toward the chapel, nestled slightly uphill. Its stone walls are damp, mossy, and probably older than anyone alive here. Inside, the scent is heavy. Tallow candles, ancient wood, and a hint of something like burned rosemary. The bells aren't just for prayer. They're protection. You settle onto a cold wooden bench as the priest mumbles his way through morning mass. You're not really listening. Not fully. Your eyes flick to the corners of the room, where the shadows don't quite sit right. You cross yourself out of habit, but also because the hair on your neck just stood up. A bell rings again as the priest lifts the chalice. Ding! A sound that cuts through the silence like light through fog. People in your village believe bells scare away demons, not metaphorically, literally. The vibrations, the tone, the suddenness of the sound, it unsettles them. Bells are rung during storms, during childbirth, during funerals. Not just for announcements, but to banish. In fact, there's a whole tradition of baptizing church bells, naming them, anointing them, treating them like holy protectors made of bronze. You once overheard someone whisper that demons can't cross a boundary marked by bell sound. You never forgot that. And it's not just bells that give comfort. Sacred relics, finger bones of saints, splinters of the true cross, a piece of St. Cuthbert's toenail. These things are said to contain holy power. The church is full of them. Tiny glass containers, cloth bundles, silver boxes. You've never seen them opened, but people treat them with reverence. Some folks claim just touching one can heal illness or stop a haunting. Others say they glow faintly in the dark, though that might just be candlelight and wishful thinking. Historians still argue whether villagers actually believed relics worked, or if it was more of a symbolic gesture, a way to say, we've got spiritual insurance. Either way, when someone gets sick or starts acting oddly, the priest waves a reliquary over them before even asking what happened. And to be fair, sometimes it does seem to help. Placebo, miracle, or divine swindle. Who's to say? Today, someone's brought a child forward. Pale, eyes wide, murmuring nonsense. Possession? Or maybe just fever? The priest doesn't care to find out. He mumbles Latin, makes the sign of the cross, and sprinkles water that smells strongly of mint and wine. You see the mother clutching her rosary so hard her knuckles go white. You're not sure what scares you more. The idea that the child might be sick, or that he might not be. Because if it's not illness, then it's something else. And that something else is always worse. On the way out of church, you notice someone scattering bone dust near the entrance. You raise an eyebrow. Cat bones, they whisper, keep spirits from following you home. You nod, like that makes sense. Because here, it kind of does. Back in your cottage, you look around at your own meager collection of holy defenses. A wax cross above the door. A dried-out palm frond from last year's procession. A small carved figure of St. Bridget with a crack down her middle. Not impressive, but it'll do. Midday, a traveler arrives. Always a moment of gossip and mild panic. Strangers might bring news, or curses. You watch him carefully. He wears a wooden pendant that seems oddly shaped. You ask about it. Piece of a saint's femur, he says casually, blessed by a bishop in Toulouse. Sounds fake. Probably is. But even you feel a little safer standing near it. You get to talking. He tells you that in the cities, churches hang relics on chains to protect the streets. That some cathedrals even ring bells every time someone dies, to make sure the soul travels clean. You wonder if your village is missing out. He also tells you of a place where people burn sulfur to choke out demons. That seems counterproductive. Sulfur smells like brimstone, and everyone knows that's a devil smell. But hey, regional variation. Historians still argue whether that practice was apotropaic or just old alchemy gone rogue. You laugh together, a rare moment of ease. But then he lowers his voice, tells you about a monastery where the monks stopped praying aloud because something in the walls prayed back. You both go quiet after that. As night falls, you do a little extra. You light an extra candle, whisper a longer prayer, maybe pull out that bit of Saint Blessed wax you've been saving for special occasions, just in case. You fall asleep to the sound of bells in the distance. Faint, but real. Comforting, but tinged with something darker. Because the louder the bell, the more something needs to be driven away. You wake to shouting. Not the angry kind, more like anxious voices spiraling into panic. You wrap yourself in your woolen cloak and step outside into the chilly dawn. The baker's wife is wailing, gesturing wildly toward the field. You squint in the half-light. Her cow is lying on its side, still, its belly bloated unnaturally. A bad omen. Or, if you ask the villagers, something far worse. She's been touched, someone mutters, which in this context has nothing to do with affection and everything to do with witchcraft. You move closer, cautiously. The air smells sour, like rot and wet wool. The cow's eyes are glassy, and its tongue is swollen and hanging from its mouth. It's a grisly sight, but more than anything, it's suspicious. And in this world, suspicion travels faster than fleas on a dog. Within the hour, talk has shifted from grief to blame. The baker swears he saw Marta, yes, her again, near the pasture yesterday. Just walking, maybe gathering herbs. But why would she be there unless she had something to hide? This is how it always starts. Something goes wrong. Milk sours, a crop fails, a child breaks into rashy blisters, and people don't look inward. They look sideways. You feel it in your chest. That tightening sensation of communal paranoia settling in like morning frost. The logic is simple, if not exactly scientific. If bad things happen, someone must be causing them. And if you're a little odd, a little poor, a little too good with herbs, or too stingy with eye contact, congratulations, you're a prime candidate. Historians still argue whether medieval communities genuinely believed in individual witches causing harm, or if they used witchcraft as a scapegoat for social tension. But you're standing here, watching a circle form around Marta's hut, and belief doesn't seem to be the issue. It's certainty. You remember when your own pig caught a fever last winter. You said nothing. You just buried it and whispered to the moon. Because drawing attention to misfortune only invites more of it, especially if someone decides you caused it. Back in the square, a chicken flutters out of someone's hands and runs into the woods. That somehow feels like a sign. Marta's door opens, and there she is. Old, bent, barefoot. Her hair a wild mat of ash gray. She's chewing something. Her eyes are small, but her stare could crack granite. She doesn't protest. She knows better. You can't reason with fear, and she's seen it too many times. They won't burn her. That's more of a later century solution. No, here they'll probably ostracize her, refuse to sell her grain, refuse to let her draw from the well. In a world this fragile, social exile can be as deadly as any pyre. She says nothing as they throw stones at her roof, nothing as someone spits near her feet. And when she finally closes the door, the air feels calmer, not better, just lighter, as though the village has exhaled. You walk away slowly, troubled. You've known Marta all your life. She delivered your cousin's baby. She cured your uncle's rash with that green paste she makes from goosegrass. And now, she's a liability, a symbol, an easy target for something you can't name. Later that afternoon, you sit by the stream and think about it all. Why does the community need a witch? Why does every misfortune require a villain? Because it's easier, you suppose. Easier than admitting that life is random. that cows die and children get sick and hail flattens crops with no warning. Witches offer a narrative, a framework, and in an age without medicine, science, or reliable weather reports, stories are the only way to make sense of chaos. There's an old woman in the next village over who wears shoes made from sheep ears. You once thought she was hilarious. Now, you're not so sure. Maybe she's a witch too. Or maybe you're just afraid of what you don't understand. That night, as you tuck into bed, you glance out the window. Marta's hut is dark. No candle, no smoke, just silence. You hope she's okay, but you don't say it aloud, not even to yourself. Instead, you whisper a little charm, one your grandmother taught you. By iron, salt, and moonbeams light, keep me safe this lonely night. It's a simple rhyme. But simple is all you have. You've barely had your morning turnip stew when the whispering starts. It slithers through the village like smoke from a damp fire. They're planning to test her, Marta. Someone, probably the miller's sister, brought up the signs, and now it's decided. No one says who exactly decided it, of course. These things just happen. You know what's coming. Everyone does. Trial by pond, trial by pin. The medieval version of science, which is to say, incredibly unscientific and mostly just mean. You wander toward the clearing near the stream, where they're gathering. The pond there isn't large, but it's deep, cold, and brown with mud. No one swims in it. It's a place of tests, not of strength or bravery, but of purity, which, in this world, means sinking. You join the semicircle of villagers as Marta is led forward. She doesn't fight. That would only make things worse. Her hands are bound, and her ankles too. There's no formal judge here, just the priest, the reeve, and a crowd of people desperate to feel like they're fixing something. The rules are simple. If she sinks, she's innocent. If she floats, she's a witch. Yes, that's really the test. It's called swimming a witch. And yes, historians still argue whether anyone truly believed it worked or if it was just a public ritual to transfer blame and tension. But from where you stand, belief is beside the point. Everyone is watching. Everyone is silent. Even the birds. They lower her into the water. The rope is tied loosely, just enough so they can yank her back out if things go badly. You hold your breath. Everyone does. She floats, and not like a buoyant balloon, just not sinking. Her body resists the cold pull of the pond in a way that seems uncanny, even though you know anyone in that many clothes might float at first. But science isn't the point here. A murmur moves through the crowd. A few people nod grimly. One crosses himself. Someone spits again. You can almost feel the shift, certainty settling in, as if her buoyancy proved every wilted crop and every stillborn lamb. They drag her out, coughing, wet, shivering. Someone wraps a cloth around her shoulders, but it's not kindness. It's just part of the process. The reeve says she'll face further questioning. Everyone knows what that means. Which brings us to the other tool in the medieval detection kit, the pin. You've heard of it, but never seen it used. Today, that changes. They bring her into the smithy, where there's better light. The crowd peeks through windows and cracks in the wooden walls. You find a spot near a gap in the boards. The midwife steps forward, strangely eager. She holds a long silver needle. The test is this. Witches have devil's marks. Spots on the skin that feel no pain, don't bleed, or bear the devil's kiss. Moles, birthmarks, old scars. These become proof. They prick her over and over. Marta winces at first, but then nothing. They found a spot. Intellectually, that anyone can fail this test. People don't feel things uniformly. Scar tissue is numb. Skin varies. But in this moment, rationality dissolves like salt in stew. Someone found the mark. She must be guilty. The village exhales again, not in relief, in confirmation. And you feel hollow. Later, as you walk home, you pass the well and see a group of children whispering. One of them points at your neighbor's cat. Familiars, they say. Witches keep them to talk to demons. You watch as the cat, an orange puffball named Tansy, bolts under a cart. You hope she stays hidden. Back home, you glance at your own skin. A mole on your wrist. A freckle on your neck. You pull your sleeve down, just in case. There's no real logic to this, you realize. No threshold of evidence or appeal. If someone wants to see evil, they will. And if enough people agree, then you're doomed. Still, some people try to stack the odds in their favor. You've heard of women shaving their whole bodies to hide moles, of others branding themselves intentionally, then claiming the scars are from holy work. You wonder if Marta ever tried any of that. Probably not. She's too old, too tired. Historians today debate whether these trials were more about control than belief. Ritualized social purging to eliminate those who didn't fit. The poor, the unmarried, the inconvenient. And looking around your village, that tracks. By evening, the mood has shifted. People are calmer, more cheerful even. The bakery smells sweeter. A few kids are playing with sticks like swords. You feel unsettled. Because the cow is still dead. The weather is still awful. And Marta is locked in the Reeves shed, alone, damp, and probably very aware of what comes next. You sit by your hearth and poke the fire with a stick. You don't say anything. But your thoughts spiral. What if it had been you? What if someone saw you talking to a frog last week? What if your cough doesn't go away? What if you float? It begins with a scream in the night. Not the normal kind. A scream that sounds like it ripped its way out of someone's throat. Half human, half something else. You bolt upright in bed, knocking over your wooden bowl of leftover lentils. Not that you were going to eat cold lentils for breakfast, but now your place smells like regret. Outside, villagers gather with torches and questions. The Reeves' daughter, Anna, is clutching her stomach, sobbing. She says she woke up floating above her bed, spinning slowly, unable to breathe. Someone saw her eyes roll back, whites only. Someone else swears they heard her growling. Possession. You don't want to say it. No one does. But once the word slips from someone's lips, it spreads like mildew on bread. The priest is summoned. Again. This time, not for sermons, but for exorcism. You trail the crowd toward the chapel, where Anna is now lying on the stone floor, eyes closed, arms stiff at her sides. She's muttering under her breath, in a rhythm that doesn't quite match any language you know. Historians still argue whether these events were actual possession, undiagnosed illness, or mass hysteria. But in the flickering candlelight of a cold stone chapel, arguments don't matter. The fear is real and contagious. The priest approaches, sweating despite the chill. He sprinkles water over Anna, mutters Latin with increasing urgency, and brandishes a cross so large it looks like it could double as a boat oar. Someone has brought relics, a sliver of St. Bartholomew's sandal, and a bit of something allegedly sacred, but suspiciously mossy. Anna suddenly shrieks. A high, keening sound that makes your molars ache. People back away. She convulses once, twice, then goes completely limp. You don't breathe. No one does. A long silence stretches. The priest, clearly shaken, proclaims the demon has been cast out. Everyone applauds. You nod, half believing, half dreading what might come next. Here's the uncomfortable part. You've seen this before. In another village, years ago. A girl started acting strangely, too. Claimed she could see through walls. Cursed her neighbors in languages no one recognized. She starved herself for days, then claimed she was being fed in dreams. It didn't end well, and it wasn't a demon that killed her. It was fear, and cold, and maybe a bit too much holy water that looked suspiciously like wine. Theories abound. Some say these possessions were caused by ergot poisoning, a fungus on rye that can cause hallucinations. Others blame trauma, malnutrition, even lead poisoning. You think back to last week's bread and recall the strange blue fuzz on the crust. You threw it out. Probably should have burned it. But these modern ideas are far away. Here now, people believe. And not just in demons, but in intervention. That if you pray hard enough, burn the right herbs, speak the right words, you can pull a soul back from darkness. In some convents, entire groups of nuns have been possessed at once. Screaming, barking, crawling on all fours. You heard once that a French abbess meowed for days. Historians still debate whether those episodes were spiritual, psychological, or maybe just too much fasting mixed with too little sunshine. But it happens, more often than anyone wants to admit. The village midwife, who's had exactly enough nonsense for one lifetime, mutters that Anna probably just had a nightmare after eating bad onions. She's not wrong, but also not welcome to speak that aloud right now. That night, you can't sleep. Every creak of the rafters feels ominous. You stare at the ceiling and wonder, if a demon did slip into your home, how would you even know? Maybe you'd get cold suddenly. Maybe the fire would refuse to light. Maybe your dreams would twist in on themselves, full of teeth and smoke. You toss and turn. Finally, in the deadest part of night, you get up and check the corners of your room, just in case. You find nothing, except a spider the size of a walnut. You decide he can stay. He's probably holier than you are. In the morning, Anna is back at home, pale but calm. She doesn't remember much. Says she dreamed of wind and water and voices like bells ringing underwater. Everyone decides it's over. The demon is gone. Life goes on. But you notice she doesn't walk quite the same now. Doesn't speak much either. And you're not sure if it's because she was possessed or just terribly, awfully frightened. The church declares it a miracle, a victory for faith. They plan a little feast. You bring a loaf of bread and hope it doesn't sprout mushrooms halfway through. Still, deep down, a question gnaws at you. What if it wasn't a demon? What if it was just something broken inside her? And if that's true, how many more of you are quietly breaking too? The parchment on the church door flutters in the breeze, nailed there with two uneven iron tacks. You squint at the uneven ink, smudged slightly by dew. It's official. An inquisitor is coming. Not just a priest. Not just a bishop. An inquisitor. One of those traveling men in black cloaks and cold eyes who ask too many questions and never seem quite satisfied with the answers. The village tenses like a string pulled too tight. You can feel it in the air. How even the birds are quieter today, as if nature itself is eavesdropping. The Inquisition doesn't come here often. You're small, out of the way, unimportant in the grand scheme of things. But someone, somewhere, must have whispered something. Maybe about Anna. Maybe about Marta. Maybe about all the recent, unusual events. He arrives on a mule, which feels a bit anticlimactic. You expected a horse that breathed fire, or at least had better grooming. But no, just a weary man in travel-worn robes, with eyes like polished stone and a bag full of questions. People bow, cross themselves. Some avoid his gaze entirely, which ironically just makes him stare harder. He doesn't waste time. That afternoon, he sets up inside the church and begins what he calls preliminary interviews, which is a fancy way of saying he's talking to people until someone slips. You don't plan to go in, but somehow your name ends up on the list. Everyone's name ends up on the list. You wait on a splintery bench with your knees twitching, trying not to chew your fingernails. When it's your turn, you step into the church and are immediately struck by how quiet it is. The Inquisitor sits on a stool. Not a throne, not even a fancy chair. Just a stool. But somehow, that makes it worse. He doesn't shout. He doesn't even frown. He just asks, "Have you seen anyone acting strangely? Has anyone confessed dark thoughts to you? Do you ever feel watched? Do you believe witches live among you?" His voice is calm, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. You nod, shrug, stammer something about bad dreams. He scribbles notes with a quill that makes a little titch sound with every stroke. You try not to say Marta's name. You fail. He thanks you, dismisses you, doesn't smile once. Outside, someone says he's called for the rack. You hope it's just a rumor. But then you see the carpenter hauling something suspiciously frame-like into the church shed, and your stomach drops. Historians still argue whether the Inquisition was driven more by fear of heresy or a lust for control. But standing here, you feel the answer is both. There's fear, yes, but also a strange hunger, a need to dig, to peel back skin and soul and find the rot underneath. You hear whispers that someone has already confessed, that Anna said Marta taught her charms, that Marta, in turn, named 3 others in a kind of dazed trance. Whether true or not, it's spreading, like mold on soft cheese, like ink in water. You pass Marta's hut. It's empty now, the door left swinging open. Inside, dried herbs still hang from the rafters, brushing the top of the door frame like a curtain. You don't go in. You don't want to be seen going in. The Inquisitor stays for 3 days, and every day, more people come out of the church looking pale and shaky, clutching their rosaries like lifelines. He doesn't need to torture most of them. Just asking questions is enough. There's something about being asked to define your soul in a room that smells like candle smoke and wet stone. It makes the strongest person falter. Then just like that, he's gone. Leaves as quietly as he arrived. No trials, no executions, just interviews, notes, seeds planted. But something in the village has shifted. You see it in the way people avoid each other's eyes, in the way no one lets their goats wander freely anymore, in the way children play more quietly, like they're afraid to laugh too loud. Because now, someone is watching. Maybe not physically, but the idea of being watched is enough. The Inquisitor's job isn't just to punish, it's to make everyone feel the heat, even when there's no fire yet. That night, you dream of questions, of rooms with no windows, of ink staining your hands, your clothes, your breath. You wake up gagging on silence. In the morning, there's a fresh charm hanging above your door. You didn't put it there, you leave it alone. There's a spot in the forest, just beyond the old mill, where the moss grows thick as velvet and mushrooms sprout in perfect little rings. You've always avoided it, not because it's dangerous in the ordinary sense, but because of the stories. The ones that don't fade with time, the ones everyone knows but no one claims to have started. They call it the Sabbath Grove. According to rumor, this is where the witches meet. On nights when the moon is fat and high, when the air tastes like iron and the owls are too quiet. You've heard that music plays there. Strange, tuneless melodies, heavy with drum beats that make your teeth ache. That women dance in circles, clothed in nothing but shadows, and that their feet don't quite touch the earth. Tonight, the moon is exactly that kind of full. You should be sleeping, but something tugs at your curiosity. You bundle up in your cloak, grab a crust of bread, and your favorite, definitely not magical, but let's be safe amulet, and slip out. As you near the grove, you hear nothing, which is somehow worse than hearing something. The trees lean inward like gossiping old men, and the air is thick with the smell of damp soil and, oddly, sage. You take a step closer and immediately regret it, because there's a circle burned into the grass, not carved, burned, just faintly. A blackened loop in the moss, like something hot danced there while you slept. You freeze, then back away. You're not that curious. The image of a witch's Sabbath is burned deep into the medieval imagination, feasting with the devil, swearing loyalty, flying on brooms or goats, or, in one baffling account, on a wooden fork smeared with flying ointment made from baby's fat and hallucinogenic herbs. Don't ask who came up with that recipe. You really don't want to know. Historians still argue whether these Sabbath tales were actual underground rituals or just fever dream accusations cooked up under torture. But what's clear is that by the late Middle Ages, everyone thought they knew what witches did when no one was looking. They flew, and not figuratively, like literally lifted off the ground, thanks to brews and balms made from hemlock, belladonna, wolf's bane, and the ever-mysterious mandrake. You've seen mandrake roots before, horrible little things that look like twisted human limbs. Some say, if you pull one up wrong, it screams loud enough to kill a man. You're not eager to test it. Back home, you remember an old woman once claimed she could fly when she rubbed her feet with frog fat and stared into a candle. You laughed. She didn't. Still, these ointments often contained hallucinogens, so perhaps people believed they flew. Maybe the experience was dreamlike, hovering over fields, speaking to beasts, kissing demons on the cheek. The kind of thing that feels real at the time, but leaves you dazed and barefoot in the cabbage patch come sunrise. The broomstick? Possibly symbolic, possibly functional. Some say women would straddle wooden poles to apply ointments to certain areas for faster absorption. And no, we're not going to unpack that one in too much detail tonight. The point is, the idea of flying was less about physics and more about freedom. In a world where you own nothing, where your life is dictated by weather, famine, and the church calendar, the idea of soaring above it all, even if only in your head, is deeply tempting. But the price of that dream? High. You've seen it. Women accused not for cursing neighbors or floating in ponds, but for dreaming too vividly. For talking about strange places, strange sounds. For growing herbs that weren't strictly approved by the priest. For gathering under the full moon, even if it was just to share bread and complaints. One time, a shepherd claimed he saw a circle of naked dancers under the stars, said they sang in a language that made his sheep lie down and weep. That's a strange claim. Sheep don't cry. But the villagers believed him. 2 girls disappeared after that. No one ever confirmed where they went. You sit by your fire, poking the coals, thinking of that burnt ring in the moss, of ointments and visions and stories that won't go away. You wonder what would happen if you danced under the moon, if you'd float or burn. A breeze blows through the crack in your wall. It smells faintly of sage. You don't sleep much that night. It starts with a drum beat, faint, distant, barely there. You're in the square, trying to trade a stale loaf of barley bread for a hunk of questionable cheese when the sound reaches your ears. Thump, 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 like a heartbeat pressed against the soil. You pause, then glance around. No one else seems to notice. Maybe it's in your head. Maybe your stomach's just making threats. But the sound continues, steady as rain on a chapel roof. Then faintly, you hear humming. You follow the noise through the winding paths of your village until you reach the edge, where the fields begin. And that's where you see them. Dancing. A line of people. 15, 20, more, moving in a lurching, uncoordinated chain. Arms flailing. Faces blank or twisted with something that looks not quite like joy. Not quite like fear. You stop in your tracks. One man spins until he collapses. A woman is chanting nonsense, eyes rolled skyward. Someone's bleeding from the feet, but keeps going. The drum beat continues. But there's no drummer. This is no party. It's a plague. Not of boils or coughing or death, but of dancing. Yes, this really happened. More than once. Historians still argue whether these dancing plagues were mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, or some kind of collective trauma response. But in the moment, with the ground trembling under your feet and the air thick with sweat and panic, it just feels like a curse. You've heard of it before, of course. A generation ago, in Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Trophea began dancing and couldn't stop. Soon, dozens joined her, then hundreds. Some danced themselves to death. Heart failure, heat stroke, exhaustion. That part doesn't make it into the sermons, but the whispers carry it anyway. No one knows why it starts. No one knows how to stop it. Some say it's punishment from the saints. Others claim it's demonic possession en masse. The idea of a devilish drummer is popular, a creature lurking in the forest or beneath the earth, banging his cursed drum and calling souls to madness. You're not sure you believe it, but you also don't not believe it. You look closer. Some of the dancers are people you know. A girl who works with the baker. A boy who never says much. Even the Reeves' wife, arms flailing like broken shutters in a storm. And what's worse, your feet itch, just slightly, enough to make you shift your weight. You step back. The church bells ring, rapid, panicked. The priest rushes forward, swinging a censer full of smoke that smells like burning time and desperation. He chants something in Latin. No one listens. Eventually, the dancers collapse, one by one. Some weep. Some laugh. Some sleep for a day and wake up with no memory. Others remain twitching, limbs moving like puppets on a frayed string. Your neighbor says it's the devil, playing games again. Another blames bad grain. A third says it's the sorrow of the land itself, leaking through the feet of those too empty to resist. You help carry the dancers to shelter. Their skin is hot, slick with sweat. One of them grabs your wrist, eyes wide. He plays beneath the roots, she whispers, and he doesn't sleep. You don't ask what she means. That night, you sprinkle salt under your bed and tuck your feet into wool socks for good measure. You lie awake, heartbeat echoing the rhythm of the invisible drum. You try to count sheep, but they all dance too. At some point, you dream of a clearing in the woods, lit by an invisible moon. You are dancing too, alone, then not. You can't see who joins you, only feel their presence. Heavy, watching. Thump, thump, thump. You wake up with aching calves and hay in your hair. You check the soles of your feet. A single blister, red and angry. You say nothing, because some things are better left unsaid. You're stirring a pot of limp carrots and leeks over your fire when there's a knock. 3 firm raps on the door, then silence. That's never a good sign. You open it to find the midwife, Agnes, standing in the dusk light, face flushed, shawl askew. "Come," she says simply, and you do. You follow her down the winding path past the well, past the sleeping pigs, to a hut near the edge of the woods. Inside, a woman is groaning. Childbirth. It's always dangerous. You help as best you can. Boiling water, folding cloth, whispering prayers through chattering teeth. Hours pass. Eventually, a small cry pierces the gloom. Relief. A girl. But that's when the tension really begins. The mother is weak. Too weak. Bleeding more than expected. Agnes begins her quiet work, muttering herbs into a mortar, mixing powders from small linen pouches. Things that aren't in any official church manual, but work. Things passed down from her mother's mother, and so on. And here's the thing. Agnes is good. Better than good. She knows which roots stop the bleeding, which teas ease fever, which ointments ease pain. The villagers rely on her, trust her more than the priest when things get dire. But lately, that trust has started to rot at the edges, because the same knowledge that helps also terrifies. You've seen it happen before. A healer saves a child, and someone whispers that it wasn't natural. A midwife predicts a breech birth, and suddenly she's seen too much. A woman survives an illness that killed 5 others, and now her name is said more quietly. It's not just the church that has suspicions. It's your neighbors, your cousins, your friends. Historians point out that midwives and herbalists were often the first to be accused of witchcraft, not because they were wicked, but because they were powerful. And power, when held by a woman outside the hierarchy, is dangerous. It disrupts the order. It asks questions that men in robes don't like to answer. You watch as Agnes rubs a paste onto the mother's belly. The bleeding slows. The baby suckles. Life, against all odds, goes on. You exhale. She smiles. But there's fear in her eyes. Later, as you walk her home, she tells you quietly, "If anything happens to that child, I'll be blamed." She says it like she's already accepted it, like she's been down this road before. You pass the chapel. The priest is inside, likely asleep, his dreams unbothered by herbs or blood or screaming women. Agnes stops, points to a carving above the door. Saint Apollonia holding her pliers and a tooth. She was burned, Agnes says, for knowing too much. You don't know what to say. You remember other women, quiet ones, smart ones, strange ones. A girl who made dolls from herbs and tucked them into cribs for luck. A widow who brewed ale so strong, people joked it must be enchanted. A woman who whistled at crows and always seemed to have meat, even in lean months. They're all gone now. Some moved, some disappeared. Some weren't talked about again. Historians still debate whether these accusations were driven by sincere belief or cold politics. But here in the mud and firelight, it doesn't matter. What matters is survival. Blending in. Keeping your knowledge just barely visible, but never too visible. When you return to your hut, you find a pouch on your doorstep. Inside, dried lavender, clove, a bit of powdered willow bark. Agnes's handwriting, small and sharp. A thank you, or maybe protection. You tuck it into the corner of your shelf, right next to your grandmother's old fertility charm, the one made from rabbit fur and red thread. You don't sleep well. You keep replaying the birth in your mind, the blood, the trembling hands, the whispered prayers that weren't in Latin. And you wonder, in a world so suspicious of kindness, how long can healers survive? The seasons change, slowly, reluctantly. The cold softens, the trees bloom again. But something in the village has shifted, and it's not just the weather. You feel it in the silences, how people hesitate before speaking certain names, how they glance over shoulders, even in daylight. You notice how neighbors now leave offerings not just at the chapel, but at crossroads, doorsteps, and old trees, just in case. Fear hasn't vanished. It's simply evolved. You help patch the thatched roof of the bakery one morning, hands scratched and soot smudged, when someone murmurs about strange lights over the hills. Witch fire, they say. You want to laugh, but you don't. No one laughs anymore. Not about that. The child born last month is thriving, chubby and loud, and fond of gnawing on turnips. No one says Agnes's name, but they all accept the herb she leaves. That's how it is now. Quiet gratitude paired with quiet suspicion. A strange truce. You find yourself thinking more about why people fear what they do. Not just demons and devils and wild women in the woods, but fear itself, the weight of not knowing, of not understanding. Because for all the exorcisms, the trials, the charms and rituals, life is still fragile. A single bad storm can wipe out a harvest. A single cough can become a funeral. And in the void left by uncertainty, fear grows wild and thick. So you cling to meaning. You sweep your home counterclockwise, whispering that old rhyme about nettles and night. You hang rosemary bundles and sprinkle salt at the windowsill. You attend church, mutter your Our Fathers, but also pocket a sprig of rowan, belt and braces. Historians write of this era with long words. Epistemic insecurity, pre-modern epistemology, ritualized othering. But none of that captures how it feels to walk home at twilight with a sliver of moon behind your back and the rustling of something not quite breeze in the hedges. You remember the stories, the burned rings, the dancing plague, Anna, still quiet, Marta, still gone. No new accusations have been made, not recently. But the silence isn't peace, it's pressure. Something held too tightly. You wonder if it will crack. You pass a group of children drawing symbols in the dirt with sticks. One of them makes a circle, then lines through it. Another chants nonsense that sounds an awful lot like a protection spell. You say nothing. You were that child once. And yet, there's a tenderness too, a softness in the shared fear. Everyone has something they do now. A tiny practice, a private superstition. Some pray. Some whisper charms to chickens. One man wears 7 layers of socks because he dreamed a demon bit his heel. Maybe that's how it survives. How you survive. Not by ignoring the fear, but weaving it into life. Giving it shape, form, and rules. Taming it. You tuck a lavender bundle under your straw mattress. For dreams. For protection. For tradition. You don't believe in witches? Not really. But you don't not believe in them either. Before bed, you light a stub of beeswax and let the flame flicker against the walls. Shadows dance like old friends. Or old enemies. You can't tell anymore. You whisper, "Nightfall gentle, breath stay still. Keep away what's not my will." Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. And now, the fire burns low. The shadows soften. The sounds of the village fade. No bells, no whispers, No footsteps in the straw, just the creak of the rafters and the steady rhythm of your own breath. You've walked through dark forests and colder truths tonight, felt the weight of fear, of silence, of suspicion curling like smoke in small rooms. You've seen what happens when belief becomes law, when the unknown becomes a threat, and when women with too much knowledge become dangerous in the eyes of the frightened. But you've also seen resilience, quiet rituals, shared glances, old prayers muttered with calloused hands. Fear may linger, but so does hope, and softness, and strange, stubborn joy. The world outside still waits, full of its flickers and footfalls, but here, now, you're safe. The door is closed, the coals are dim, and nothing stirs in the corners. Let yourself drift. There are no questions now, no tests, no watchers, just the slow ebb of thoughts, the settling of your breath, and the hush of a world that no longer needs your attention. Sleep well, traveler. End of script. Sweet dreams.